And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today is exciting because we're going to talk about a game, an expansion for a game that you probably know and love, Power Grid. It's one of my favorites, but today we're going to look at an expansion for Power Grid called The Robots. It's designed for 2 players to add a 3rd player that is a robot. Of course, you could add more robots, and even if you have 3 human players, you could add robot or robots. These dumb robots will do stupid things that a normal human player would never do, but it changes your strategy and gives it an interesting twist and makes a 2-player game feel like a 3-player game. Let's check it out. I'll show you how it's played, and then I will see you on the other side. The robot comes with 5 different parts of the robot. So obviously we have the heads, we have sort of the upper shoulders, the middle upper torso, the lower torso, and the feet. And for each of those parts of the robot, they're going to do a certain thing in a certain phase of the game. And each of these have basically, there's 6 tiles of each of these. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to randomly basically shuffle each part of the robot, and you're randomly going to select one. Now this was designed for 2 players really, where this robot will be a 3rd player. It does say you can add multiple robots, more than one. It says you can play them even though you have more than 2 people, but this was really designed to be an aid with 2 people playing, and the robot would be the 3rd player. So once you've done a robot, you basically put them together like a puzzle. You have one crazy robot for this round, for the game, and essentially there's the top head is for the first city choice, the bottom one's for the special ability, and then it's for phases 2, 3, and 4. We'll go to the details of these in just a moment. But let's look at some of the general robot rules. So in general, there's a few things to make note that the robot, you always can look and count his money. If they have to make decisions and they're equal decisions, basically you randomize it by, basically doing a component drop or randomizing it by dropping 2 different colored houses or things like that. Also, because of these tiles, sometimes the robot will make stupid decisions and there may not be optimal to what a normal player would, but that's okay. That's how this is designed to play. So the text on these always overcome any rules that might be in the game. Those are sort of the general rules of this. Let's take a closer look at the first city, the head of the robot. So in this case, this is last choice. So basically in the phase 4 of the game in the first round, when it's time to build, the last player gets to choose where he builds his first building. And that's what this tile does, is last choice essentially. No matter what the player order is at that point, the robot is always going to get the last choice, and the person that's last, the real last human player, is going to get to choose where that house goes, and that's just basically how it happens with the first city. Now in phase 2, when we're auctioning, he's always going to bid on, in this case, on the building that supplies the most cities. And if there's a tie between a bunch of them that can supply the most cities, he's going to bid on the one with the highest number. Now, he always starts at the minimum bid is always the number on the tile, or on the number of the auction plant card. And the maximum bid is plus 10 electros. So if you have a power plant that's worth 17, he'll bid up to 27 for that. And he's always going to bid on that one with the most cities, or if it's tied, the one with the highest number. There's some general rules for this phase 2 for the robots. For example, they have to have the money to be able to bid for it. If the power plant he wants to bid on has a lower number than his smallest power plant, he won't bid on it. If he can supply 2 more buildings than how many cities he has, he won't bid. And if he buys a 4th, he always discards the smallest. So those are some general rules that they're always doing in phase 2, along with that special ability. In phase 3, when you're buying resources, this robot will buy enough for a normal production, meaning he's just going to buy enough to do normal production on his power plants for that round. And then he's going to buy as many as he can, the least available resource. So depending on the 4 resources, whichever one there is the least of, he's going to buy as much as he can, assuming he can hold it, and he's going to store it as extra on those power plants. And there's a little caveat here that 1 uranium is actually costs as 3 normal ones, so he doesn't automatically always buy uranium. In this case, we saw him mostly buy trash in this case. So he'll buy enough to do normal production, and then he'll start to stock up on the least available resource to kind of make a shortage, but assuming that he can actually hold it at that point. In this case, in phase 4 during the building phase, in step 1 he's going to build 1 city, step 2, 2 cities, and step 3, 3 cities, obviously assuming that he can afford them at those times. He's also going to buy and pay for 1 city at a time, and then he's always going to go to the cheapest connection. That's phase 4. And his special ability in this case is in phase 2, he pays half of his bid for his power plants. So he might have a power plant that's worth 17 that he's going to bid up to 27 for, but then he only pays half. That's this robot's special ability. So this would be how this robot would act in the different phases in his special ability for this specific game. Let's take a look at what some of the other things are for these types of tiles. I'll show you some, not all of each of the sets of the tiles. So for the head, during the robot's first city of the game, it can be completely random, where you randomize which area they're in first, and then you slowly randomize which location is the one that's his. Deciding choices one at a time. Each person decides basically which place is not going to be his house, his first building, and then essentially you narrow it down to the last one is standing is where he builds his first building. Bidding choices, the 2 players or whoever's playing will bid, and whoever bids the highest pays that to the robot, and then they get to say where the robot builds first. And then there's a player's choice where each of the players pick one of the cities that they might want him to build in, and then it gets randomized, and whatever one wins that randomization is the one that gets that. Okay, phase 2, during the auctioning for the power plants. Some of these are, he bids on every power plant. His maximum bid is the minimum bid plus 1. So no matter what, you're always going to have to bid 2 over the minimum to win anything from the robot until he wins one. Second smallest number. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Maximum bid is his minimum bid. So if you want the second smallest number, you have to overbid it by 1. Using the cheapest resources. Pretty self-explanatory, but his maximum bid is minimum bid plus 5. So you have to outbid him for the one with the cheapest resources. Buys the first choice. So that's the first choice available on the left side. And he buys it for minimum bid. And it's the highest numbered power supply plant. His maximum bid is his minimum bid plus the number of cities that he owns. Those are different ways that the robot can bid in addition to what I showed you earlier today. Okay, phase 3, when you're buying resources, some of the other things you could do is normal production. Hey, he's just going to buy the resources to do a normal production, meaning he just fills up his power plants as normal for 1 round of production. Second one is buying all the resources. In this case, he will buy as many resources as he can, and as soon as he starts to get broke, he leaves the most expensive ones there. Normal production, and so he's going to fill up everything for normal production, then he's going to buy every resource he can and store that's less than 5 electro. Odd turn, he's going to do normal production, basically filling up his power plants to do 1 round of production. And then in even turns, he's going to buy as many resources as he possibly can and store. And then if he's the last player, he's going to buy as many resources, all resources that he can have and store. Otherwise, it's normal production. So that's for buying resources. Okay, phase 4, we're building. He will build all cities. So essentially, he's going to build as many cities as he can afford. All cities, but never more than however many cities the first player has. So he's going to build as many as he can afford, but never having more than the first player. The building, last player chooses, but cannot build through possible cities. So whoever's in the last player turn order is choosing where he builds, but he cannot build through cities that are open, essentially. Phase 4 is only supplied cities, so he can never build more than how many cities he supplies. And then this one is, when you're in step 1, he can build as many cities as he can, but obviously keeping it less than 7. Otherwise, he can build as many cities as he wants, but never building where the first player has a building. Interesting. And the last of the tiles is we have special abilities. In phase 4, always builds first city for 0 electro. At the game start, he gets $100. Phase 5, he gets income for plus 1 city. Phase 4, all cities cost 10 electro. And in phase 1, always last in player order. Again, all these tiles that I'm showing you, only one of them will get randomly assigned to the robot. So every time you play the game, the robot's going to be quite different. All right, robots expansion. The idea was cool to me. It's like $6 on cool stuff. So it was like a no-brainer to just try it out, right? Here's how I feel. I've heard and read about people playing this with multiple robots. That I will probably never do. I've heard about people playing this with more than 2 players, meaning they have 3 humans or more and adding a robot. That I would never do. The only time I'm ever going to use these robots is when I have 2 players. And it's going to be a 3rd player. Why? Well, it doesn't feel like I'm playing with 3 players. It doesn't. I don't feel like I'm playing with 3 human players. But it does make a 2-player game feel like a 3-player game, even though it's not a human. Let me explain. The regular 2-player game, blah. 2-player games with robots, since these robots are doing predictable yet crazy stupid things, it changes the game in such a way that, first of all, there's so many different combinations of those 5 different tiles, 6 different tiles of each of the 5 different phases, that you'll never have the same game twice. And yes, you can predict what the robot's going to do, and yes, you can predict which player might be able to alter what the robot will do in that stage, but that adds a layer of complexity, a layer of coolness. One of the robots that we play with just like bought as many resources as possible, so it was like, man, it changed what I would normally maybe do. Or maybe like when he's always buying the highest power plant, and man, you might want to bid him up to try to get the next one up. So yes, he's predictable, and yes, he's stupid, and yes, he would do things a human player would never do. It does not feel like I'm playing a game of 3 with Power Grid. But it does feel better than playing with a game of 2 with no robots of Power Grid. So I would play this, let's put it this way, I would not turn down, if I'm in the mood to play Power Grid, I'm like really in the mood, Jones will play Power Grid, haven't played it for a while, and I have just 2 of us, I wouldn't not play Power Grid with the robots. I would play it. So it's decent, it's good, it allows me to play a 2-player game of Power Grid without it feeling completely like a waste of time. And so it's good, but I would never play with more than 2. If I had 3 players, I would always pick 3 human players over 2 players and a robot. But if I'm stuck with 2 and I'm really in the mood to play Power Grid, I would play it with the robots. Sure, there's other 2-player games that I would probably rather play than 2-player Power Grid robots, but sometimes you just feel in that itch for Power Grid, which I feel often. And if that's what you got, and you only got 2 players, robots for $6, no brainer. Check it out, might be for you.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.